Hi, this is Ken White, lead pastor of Forest Park Covenant Church, and we're here with Jill Dannenberg from Living Threads Ministry. And we love to be able to talk with people who are supported missionaries or supported missionary groups, and it's just our great pleasure to be here today with Jill. And Jill, I'm just really glad that you can join us. You know, we always like to start with a personal note. So, Jill, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm Jill Dannenberg, and I live in Zeeland, Michigan. I'm a wife, I'm a mother of three, and a grandmother of three.
Yeah. What's the names of your kids?
Matt, Christy, and Kara.
Yeah, do they live here in the area?
No, my son lives in Iowa, my daughter lives in Holland, the middle one, and my youngest lives in Germany.
Oh, in Germany. Why is she in Germany?
She went there to teach English as a second language, and she fell in love with a German and married a German.
Okay. Where do they live in Germany?
Hamburg.
Oh, I've been to Hamburg.
Have you?
Have you been to Hamburg?
I have.
Yeah.
I have.
How do you go there often?
No, she's been there 8 years, and
Okay.
my husband and I are going this year between Christmas and New Year's to spend a week with them.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And grandkids there, and
They're in Holland,
they're all in Holland.
but all three of them belong to my middle daughter.
Yeah. How old are your grandkids?
7. They're all 3 girls, and the oldest is 7, and then the twins are 5.
Oh, twins.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of watching of your grandchildren?
Well, I work full
Oh,
time
you
with
do?
the ministry.
Okay.
And so every Wednesday night we take them, and mom and dad can have a date night. And then we have a place at Maranatha over here in Muskegon.
Oh, you do?
So we're here on weekends, and so they come up and spend time with us there too.
That's just really wonderful.
Yeah,
That's really wonderful.
yeah.
Well, you were talking about your ministry there, so I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about how you got involved in Living Threads ministry. Maybe you started it.
I did. I always like to say it was God's idea, and He founded it. He just gave me the privilege to be able to implement His idea. So back in 2010, we were operating a commercial embroidery business, doing corporate logos and school apparel. And one day I turned the machines off and I started to pray. And I remember a specific prayer, and it was a prayer of surrender. And it was, Lord, if there's any gifts or talents I have that you can use for your kingdom, I surrender them to you. Not realizing how dangerous that prayer is, not knowing what God's going to do with it. It wasn't long, a few months, and I was sensing God wanting us to sell the business. Now, if you remember the economy in 2009, 10, nothing was selling. And I went to my husband and said, I think we need to sell the business. And he says, why? And I said, I don't know, but I know God's calling us to sell it. So we moved forward. We put it up for sale. It sold in its entirety in 2 weeks.
Wow.
Nobody even the person who bought it didn't even counter it. It sold. Once it sold, I started spending time during my quiet time journaling. And during that time, God started revealing to me this idea of living threads. So I just started journaling, and I didn't tell a soul. Once I had it all journaled and I felt like, oh, this is what God wants us to do, I told my husband. And he's like, how did you ever think of that? I said, I didn't. God revealed it. And I just journaled. And so we went forward and took the embroidery shop, transformed it into a ministry center, and started Living Threads. I told a group of women, there were 6 women from my church, that I looked at as spiritual mentors. I met with them, told them what God was calling me to do, and just revealed it to them. 2 of them said, when do you want to start? We want to start with you. And we began. And God has done immeasurably more than all we could have asked or imagined in these 12 years.
Yeah.
We were in that embroidery shop for 1 year, and then we moved to a location in Zeeland called City on a Hill. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's an amazing concept. They took the old hospital and turned it into a nonprofit center. We have 37 different nonprofits in this building, and they lease space to nonprofits at an affordable price. An all-in-one inclusive price, includes your utilities, everything. So we're in there amongst many other nonprofits serving the kingdom.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it would be great if you also just kind of gave a thumbnail of what the ministry is, what Living Threads does.
Okay, Living Threads really has 3 facets or 3 legs to it. God called us to serve the grieving. And so in doing that, anybody who's ever lost anyone, you know that it's really important. You want them remembered. And so we give them a tangible way to remember their loved one, and and to carry on their legacy through a memory quilt using their clothing that they had. Oh. So a variety of clothing will reflect that person, okay? And we can also do printed images on fabric, and all different designs that reflect the person. Yeah. The second aspect of the ministry is 100% of the funds raised from the quilts is now going to keep a child alive. A family has lost somebody that they dearly loved and they deeply miss, but in doing so, they're keeping a child alive. That gives purpose in their quilt. So whatever money they donate for that quilt, 100% is going to the kids in Kenya. And we're placing Bible clubs throughout the slum of Kibera, located outside of Nairobi. And we've got 9 Bible clubs right now where any child can come and hear the good news of Jesus. But then the third leg of the ministry is the ladies who make these quilts, they're volunteers. And it has given them purpose and to use the gifts God's given them. And I cannot tell you how many of them have said to me, even their children have come to me, thank you that my mom has a place to go. Yeah. And they support each other.
Well, I'm just going to rewind and ask about each one of those ministries. So creating quilts, memory quilts for those who are grieving, how did you come up with that idea? Where did that come from? Have you experienced grief in your life that's led you to that?
Well, at the time that God called me to it, I had not experienced it. So it was really interesting that God called me to that. I was a quilter. I knew sewing was something that I loved to do. So that was a gift that I had that surrendered to the Lord. Why he called me to the grieving, I didn't know at that time, but he gave me a heart of compassion and empathy for those people. And so the greatest gift you can give somebody is just to listen. And so I would spend an hour and a half, 2 hours just letting them talk. And they would pull out their clothing one at a time and tell me a story. And I do no grief counseling, I just listen. And it is so meaningful. Since then, I've lost both my parents, and now I understand deeper how important it is to have quilts and how important it is to just be able to talk about them and have them remembered.
It sounds like as you were doing that, your understanding of the ministry sort of developed as you were doing it. Is that
That's right. It really is. You know, when you've heard the saying that God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. I felt like that's what he was doing because I had no experience leading a nonprofit, starting a nonprofit. I had no experience with helping those who are grieving, but God just really equipped.
Is there a story that you think of when you're giving this quilt to somebody, something that you just remember, something that helps you to keep going in the ministry?
Oh, absolutely. And I could tell you many, Ken, but we do more people's children than you would imagine. A lot of people think we're doing end of life like parents and grandparents, but we do way more children. We've had children who were either stillborn, toddlers who were illness or accident. I've had families who come in whose children have taken their life, and I had 3 families come in whose children were murdered. And you sit across the table from these parents. That is really, really tough. But I remember one particular mom, one mom came in my office carrying like a Myers plastic grocery bag, and it looked to me like scraps. And she knocked on my door one day and she said, "Can you help me?" And she said, "This is all I have left of my daughter. These are her clothes. She died in a car accident on the way to a youth group event. And I tried to make something, and this is all I've got left." And she opened that bag, and it was just pieces. And she said, "For 10 years, I played yo-yo with this. I'd put it in my closet because it was too emotional. I'd take it out and try to work on it. I'd put it back 10 years. And she brought it to me. She says, "Is there anything you can do with it?" And so Our Ladies made a quilt for her in memory of her daughter. And that was so meaningful. Another mom, her son was killed on his way to school in a car accident. And we made a quilt. And she told me, she said, "I lay it on a bed, and I lay on top of that quilt because I can still smell him." And she said, "On the hard days, I lay on there and just smell my son." Those are really meaningful. Another family whose child was murdered, they were camping in California. And he was camping, and he was in a sleeping bag on the beach. And while he was sleeping, somebody walked by and just shot him in the head for no reason. And that family, brought his clothes. And that is just hard to wrap your head around. Really, really hard. But it brings so much joy when you know you can give them some kind of comfort and something that they can share.
Yeah. It's very moving.
It is.
So here's my question for you. You just seem like a very joyful person and somebody who has really moved into this ministry. And I just wonder, from 2010 to 2022, what's happened inside of you as you've done that? I don't know if that's a fair question, if that makes any sense to you.
Well, one thing is my dependence upon the Lord has grown even more, because not only dependence on how do I comfort these families, what do I do, what do I say, and only the Lord can give them that kind of comfort and peace. Yeah. So I would say it's my dependence on providing, giving me wisdom and discernment, but providing for the ministry is what's really happened.
Yeah, I think that when people minister in those kinds of broken situations, and I've walked into those kinds of rooms, the air just feels like crystal. It feels like it can just shatter apart, and you want to be very careful, but your presence is obviously very powerful.
And that, when you say that, I really don't say much. I just let them talk, and I let them cry, and sometimes I cry right along with them because it's just so emotional. Yeah. But to give them undivided time in my office, just us, quiet, no interruptions, and just to allow them to talk. Client after client has said that's the greatest gift, that you just listened.
Well, it's also real powerful the way you take that ministry, and then trying to think of the right word. I was thinking of the word leverage. That doesn't seem right, but you take that ministry and then you multiply it into another ministry, which is this ministry you were talking about in a very poor district of Nairobi. And anybody who's traveled to Africa, and I have, you come across these places, and they're just so vast and big. And so describe that. First of all, how does it move from what's going on with the quilting to that ministry? And then we'll talk a little bit about the ministry.
Well, Ken, when the ministry was first forming, it's interesting. God, I don't know why or how he does it, but he does something. I can feel it in my heart. If God's trying to get my attention, my heart does a different kind of beat, and I kind of go, okay, Lord, what are you trying to tell me? And I was at a presentation. Nobody knew about Living Threads forming, and I was at a presentation of some people that had gone to Africa on a mission trip. And I was listening to them talk about this slum, and all of a sudden my heart started doing that. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is where you want the money to go. So the organization called International Needs USA, I contacted them and I just interviewed them. And I knew that God wanted us to give the money where evangelism was a priority and not just humanitarian aid, because I felt like we could feed a child for a day and extend his life for a day, but he's still lost for all of eternity. And if evangelism was the top priority and they came to know Jesus, then they would, for all of eternity, they would live. So I interviewed this organization, and the president said to me, Jill, I want to tell you about Kibera, and I want to tell you something else. Our organization, number one priority is evangelism. But we do have to feed their tummies so they can hear the word. But number one is evangelism. So I knew this is who we had to partner with. We partnered with them. And they wanted to place Bible clubs in the slum so any child could attend. The slum is so poor. The parents, many children are orphaned. The little mud huts are 8 by 10 feet. They're sticks that are woven together, packed with mud and feces as their walls. And they might have 5 kids laying on cardboard or a mattress. But they get $1 a day to feed these kids about on the average. So anyway, the extreme poverty is unbelievable, and they don't have the opportunities our children have. Like, they don't have free education. They have to pay to go to school. Unemployment is in the 80-some% in the slum. So they just don't have the opportunities we have.
Yeah. And the Bible clubs themselves, they run every day, or?
The Bible clubs run every Saturday. And so the kids are fed. Social workers are there, pastors, there's cooks, there's teachers. So what Living Threads does, families make a donation for the volunteer hours. We track that and we let them know. So if we had 63 and a half hours in your quilt, you make a donation for that labor, and all of it goes to the Bible clubs. And so we support the starting of new Bible clubs. The kids did not have tables and chairs, plates and cups and spoons. They didn't have Bibles. They didn't have teaching material. We pay for all of that. We pay for cooking pots and stoves, anything, the food, anything it takes to run those Bible clubs. And as of 2010, we have raised over $230,000 from these quilts. Wow. So it's made such a difference.
So just to ask it again, the quilts are, how does the money get raised?
Say you came in to have a quilt made, and you told me, I want a lap size quilt, and this is what we pick out all the items. I calculate how much does that cost Living Threads, what materials do I have to buy, supplies, and I give you an invoice to reimburse us for the supplies. Okay, so it's a wash.
Yes.
And then it's assigned, I order supplies, instructions are written, it's assigned to a volunteer. And the volunteer tracks her hours in getting the quilt done. So I let you know when it's time to pick it up, and then you would come and meet with me. And a really cool thing is we give everybody the opportunity to have a memory label put on the back of the quilt, and it's made out of fabric. You can say whatever you want to say, you can include pictures, name, dates, and that's on the back of the quilt. But before you come, I would let you know how many hours. So say we had 48 and a quarter hours. You make a donation, whatever. I give you two guidelines. One, pray about it. What would God have you give? And number two, what would you want to be paid per hour? Probably not $1 an hour. So be fair about that, because all the money is going to Kenya anyway. We're not keeping any of it. So people have said to me, I can have a quilt made from my neighbor in her house, or so-and-so cousin will make me one. But we have not found anybody in the United States who does this and gives 100% of the money to missions, and that is serving in that way. So we've had people come who say, we want to come to you because it has purpose. My loved one, we lost them, but we get to keep this child alive now.
How many quilts have you made?
We do about average about 100 a year. They take 4 to 6 months to complete. So when you think of that, we usually have anywhere from 25 to 40 going at one time.
Yeah.
So it takes a little while.
North of 1,000 quilts.
We're getting close. Yeah,
okay.
Right around there. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then the third leg you were talking about,
Yeah.
the third ministry.
Yeah. And this developed after the ministry started, and the volunteers who come, we go through an application process and an orientation process. It's not a drop-in volunteer thing. We need ladies who are talented, are gifted in quilting, and then once they come on board, they have to commit to at least one full day a week. So they're assigned a day a week that they come. And we have all the sewing stations. We have the cutting, sewing, ironing stations. They just have to come. And we have everything. Everything's in a tub with their name on it that they work on. And but what has happened is those volunteers have become such a support system to each other. We have many widows who need a purpose and a place to go. They encourage, support each other, love each other. We've had some hospitalized. We've had some go through tough times with family or children. And they call themselves the Stitching Sisters. They have become so close, and they minister to one another.
Yes.
We didn't expect that, but that has been really special. This new initiative is a childbearing loss initiative. So women who have miscarried, had stillborns, or maybe aborted their babies, they're grieving silently. Many times people didn't even know their baby, they were pregnant or knew their baby, but those mothers never forget. And so we started a childbearing loss pillow initiative. So if your neighbor or somebody in your congregation miscarries, We have these pillows. We have a variety of fronts, and we can personalize the back, but we have them pre-made. So if you know somebody who's miscarried, you can come and pick one up, and you can give it to them and say, I remember, please remember your baby.
Well, I think it's time for us to look at these quilts that you brought. You brought 3 and a couple of other items, and so we're just going to hold them up and talk about them. Okay. So we're going to take a look at this. We're going to hold each one up, and Jill's going to just talk about it a little bit.
This quilt is made in memory of a father and a husband, and he wore button-down shirts all the time. So because that was important to the family, this represents him, and these were his blue jeans. This man, there's no doubt what he loved and his passion was Harley motorcycles. And so we have a variety of shirts, sweatshirts, t-shirts, and even button-down shirts and a necktie. This is an example of what we can do and print to fabric. We have pictures here and up there of if something was important to someone, we can print it to fabric and include it in the quilt. And one thing we included here, and we're doing more and more of that, I don't know if you can see it, it says Love Dad. And so we take a loved one's signature and transfer that to fabric as if they've signed their own quilt. Not everybody wants a quilt, and sometimes they want a quilt plus pillows. And so here's an idea from a lady's blouses and shirts. Here's a pillow. We have very, very rarely does somebody ever only order one thing, Ken. I had a family order 26, another family order 16. So they'll order multiple pillows for family members. And this is an example of our child loss pillows. This is one of 5 of the designs showing mom and dad. And the bird flying away represents the baby. And then on the back, we can personalize it. It says, I may have only held you in my womb for a moment, but I will hold you in my heart forever. So that's an example of that.
That's great. Let's have a seat again. Okay. Jill, I always give people, or I hope I always give people, a last chance to just say anything else that's on their mind.
First of all, I want to thank Forest Park for coming alongside of us, believing in us, supporting us, and helping further God's kingdom call on our ministry. Because we give 100% away, Ken, we are 100% donor dependent. Yes. And so I'm so grateful for that. So I want to thank you.
Glad to be a part of that. I'm curious, how did we make a connection with you?
Okay, at Maranatha, I had mentioned we have a place at Maranatha. A group of women had asked me to present the ministry to them. And one of the women there was Jana Mead.
Oh, okay.
And she serves on your mission committee.
Yes, she does.
And so the mission committee invited me to come and share. And then Ken Cruzen, he came to our banquet. We have our largest fundraiser is a fall banquet, and Ken and his wife came to that. And so that was our connection.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Jill, we're just so appreciative of you coming, and it is just a moving ministry that you have. You could see me being moved by that. I'm sure that is everybody's experience as they listen to what you do, and I'm just appreciative for you listening to God's call in your life.
Thank you very much. It's an honor.